everyone. This is more of a rundown of our journey to the land of Israel than it is a sermon. I've had several people ask if I would do this, and so I'll give you guys a brief rundown of what we did in Israel and some of the things we saw. Now, we saw many sites, so there's absolutely no way I can give you even every site, a rundown of every site, because we're looking at probably 30-something areas we went to. But to start, here is the group that went with us. On the right, we have archaeologist Eli Shukran. We had him for a couple days. He's one of the most prominent archaeologists there right now. He excavated the city of David. He found all sorts of really neat finds. One of the most notable is he found what is believed to be the bell. It's a golden pomegranate that was hanging on the high priest's garment. When he walked into the Holy of Holies, they could hear him moving around. And he actually found that in the city of David, some of the excavations. Then there's Randy next to Eli. Behind Randy is Don Esposito. He was with us for almost the whole trip. And then there's Elder James King and his wife Sharon. Next to Elder King is my dad, and then my Aunt Linda, my dad's sister in front. And then we got Elder Dwayne and Wilson Mwangi in front of Dwayne, and then my Uncle Gary and Aunt Stacy Manseger. And then we got Ed and Loretta, and then me, and then Russ King in the back, and that's our driver, Soheil. So this is the three amigos, as I affectionately call us. This is another archaeologist. We spent about half the time. His name's Yossi, and he's actually a prominent archaeologist as well. He's got some finds that are in the Israeli museum. So he was a really nice guy, very informative, gave us a lot of good information. Of course, we spent majority of our time with Elder Don, and he's with the congregation of YHWH in Jerusalem. And it was really nice having Don there because, I mean, it's great having archaeologists, but Don has been there for well over 20 years, and so he has a lot of insight that matters to us as believers. So a lot of the similar belief systems. So it was nice to hear his vantage point in many of these areas. So we arrived in Tel Aviv, and as you can see, they're building like crazy. This is only just one small area, and there's cranes everywhere, the whole city. And then, of course, once you get there, first thing you got to do is take your shoes off and get your feet in the Mediterranean. So that's what Dwayne and Wilson was doing there. Tel Aviv, you might wonder about that name. A tel, and you hear this word tel a lot, it basically means an artificial mountain. It's a mountain of civilizations, a mountain that's built on layers of civilizations. And, of course, Abib, it's like we look for the green ears of barley, and that makes Abib. That is the beginning of the year, so it means new, essentially. So what you have new, which is Tel Aviv, the city, and then this picture is taken from the port city of Jaffa, which was where Jonah left. And you can see the old right there. So Tel Aviv literally means old and new, and it's built right next to Jaffa. One of the cool locations, I thought anyway, was Caesarea Maritima. Here's a few facts. The city and harbor were built under Herod the Great during 22 to 10 BCE. It rivaled any port city of Rome. Josephus describes the harbor as being as large as the one at Piraeus, the major harbor of Athens. Peter baptized Cornelius, the centurion, at his household here. When Paul was in danger in Jerusalem, he left to Caesarea, and then, of course, left Caesarea port to his native Tarsus. And then there's remnants of crusader walls and a moat built by King Louis IX of France in 1251. And this is part of the crusader castle and fortifications that you see there. It's really interesting how they built these things. You can see the steep angled walls, and that would have been a moat, literally a moat that went around this whole fortress. And this is the main gate as you walk through, and the architecture is beautiful, and just obviously took a lot of manpower to construct. This is looking out towards the port. This is one of the breakwaters. There was massive breakwaters all around this port. And when they built this, they actually took huge barges. And imagine filling these barges, and then they would sink a lot of them down. Some of them, they might actually open up the bottom and debris would fall down. That's how they believe they built these huge breakwaters. And they circle the whole port city. It's huge. I can't really show you from the pictures. And then, of course, there's an aqueduct of Caesarea. And this goes for 6 miles to the springs of Shumi. And as you can see, my dad's pretty impressed by it. Here is on top of the aqueduct. It's kind of open right there on the left side, but it was kind of inside it. I saw 2 water systems that would have went through there when I was kind of looking through there. I've got some GoPro video on top of it. And as you can see, we're actually looking towards Caesarea. The breakwaters are kind of on your right. You can see a little bit out there. There's a ship out there. Anyway, just a beautiful location. This is the actual original port where Paul would have left. In the first century. Water actually would have been where the grass is right there. So Paul would have left somewhere in this area. And that's what's so amazing about Israel is the fact that you actually get to feel. You can. What I mean by that is you can touch and feel what you read about in the scriptures. And there's this connection that I can't describe. I mean, you have to see it for yourself. They have a hippodrome. This is basically just a metal art sculpture of chariots. And here we actually recorded a TV program. On top, Randy and my dad are sitting on the actual location where King Herod or Pontius Pilate would have sat to watch the hippodrome games, with the chariot races, and I'm sure gladiator games and things like that. Just another shot there from the top. Beautiful location. Actually, I'd like to go back real quick. Behind them towards the Mediterranean, that's where Pilate's house would have been. So this here is actually part of the palace that's kind of being taken over by the Mediterranean Sea. This would have been a swimming pool. And you can't really see too well in the picture, but there's floor mosaics and things still there, which he would have more than likely walked across to go swimming. Pretty amazing. They found the Pilate stone here in Caesarea. And it's the earliest surviving record and only historical evidence of Pontius Pilate found near the ancient theater built by decree of Herod the Great around 22 to 10 BCE. I actually don't have any pictures of the theater. A lot of it's been rebuilt, so it's not as impressive. But here's what it says. It says, to the divine Augusti Tiberium, Pontius Pilate, prefect of Judea, has dedicated this. So the one I have here is actually a mock-up. They took the original back to the Israel Museum. We ended up going to Mount Carmel. This is where the prophet Eliah killed the prophets of Baal. We're not going to read about all that, but I'm sure you remember the story. Several hundred prophets of Baal was slew right there with a miracle by Yahweh. And this is the location. Looking out, you can see it's beautiful. My Aunt Linda, who's from Colorado, says it looks a lot like Colorado. Here's another angle here. This is actually looking towards the Jezreel Valley. And then, right near Carmel, within a few miles, there's Tel Meggido. And again, a mound of Megiddo. Today, you might recognize it as Armageddon. Megiddo is strategically located at the head pass through the Carmel Ridge, overlooking the Jezreel Valley from the west. This is just some interesting facts. For the 1st to 9th century BCE, new gate and walls were built by the Israelites, Solomon, Ahab, or Jeroboam. 945 BCE, Pharaoh Shishak conquers the city as per 1 Kings 14:25. A fragment of a tablet with his name was found there. And then 609 BCE, the battle between the Egyptian army and the kingdom of Judah, that's where we find King Josiah, who had an untimely death in that area. There's the Jezreel Valley. This is, of course, where the armies will gather before they actually march to Jerusalem. It's a huge area. There's been many battles throughout the centuries here. You can kind of see, I wanted to show this picture because you can see there's 26 layers of civilizations here, and you can see to the left of that altar how deep this is. This is an actual excavation where they excavated down and they found this particular altar of unhewn stones right here. So it gives you a good description of how deep they have to go. They can probably keep on going, but right to the right of it, you can't really see, there was also a temple. So they had an altar right in front of it's a Canaanite temple. And then, of course, this is a manger, an actual manger. And a manger is basically a trough where horses would drink water, because Megiddo was on top of this fortified city. They had a lot of chariots, and with chariots comes horses. So they had a lot of horses in there, and as you can see, mangers. This is another sculpture, kind of give you an idea of how they would feed the horses. But there was a lot of stables on top. From what I understand, from what Ellie told me, was they would open up the gates, send the chariots out, attack, and then they would come right back into the city. This is a grain silo there. You can see the spiral staircase going down. Obviously would have filled that with grain. And then this is the water system they had. It's actually built a lot like Jerusalem. Jerusalem's built around the Gihon Spring, which was a natural spring. There was a natural spring here as well. So they had a natural spring, obviously, that would give them fresh water. Then the next place we went is Capernaum, as some people call it, or Capernaum, as you hear when you go to the land of Israel. Simon Peter, Andrew, James, and John, as well as the tax collector Matthew, called Capernaum their home. Peter's actual house was found here, and I'm going to show you a picture of that. It's pretty interesting. Yahshua taught in the synagogue on the Sabbath in Capernaum and healed a man who was possessed by an unclean spirit. You can look in Luke 4:31 and Mark 1:21 if you want to read that later. There's a 4th century synagogue here built on the ruins of an older synagogue from the time of Yahshua, and that's where Yahshua would have been preaching on the Sabbath. Here's some facts about the house of Peter. It's a group of private houses they found there, built around the 4th century BCE, which remained until the early 4th century. Yahshua began his ministry right there. They believe that's Peter's house, and there's a lot of evidence to show that it was. We see a major transformation of one of the homes in the 4th century. They plastered the walls, which is almost unheard of for such a modest dwelling. There's hundreds of late graffiti scratched into the church walls because they built this octagonal church around, and the Byzantines did, around this original house. There's sayings like, Master Yahshua, help your servant. Messiah, have mercy. They're all written in Greek, Syriac, or Hebrew, and are sometimes accompanied by etchings of small crosses from the Byzantine era, or in one case, a boat, which is kind of interesting. The excavators claim that the name of Peter is mentioned in several graffiti in the area. You can't go in there, so we couldn't get any pictures of the actual graffiti because there's a huge church built on top of it. It literally straddles the top. The octagonal Byzantine church built around Peter's house in the middle of the 5th century, and you're going to see that too. The location of a paraplegic who was lowered through the roof, you might remember that, to reach Yahshua where he was healed, and that's in Mark 2 and Luke 5:17. And here, right here, this is just a picture I took of the Sea of Galilee. This is just a beautiful location, and the Sea of Galilee is kind of a misnomer. It's a lake. It's actually Lake Tiberias, is what they call it there in Israel. It's like about, I think, 5 miles, 5 by 9, something like that. I mean, it's a good-sized lake, but by no means a sea. And this is Peter's house. You can see kind of in the forefront there, the part of the octagonal church that was built around it. In the center is the original house. I got a better picture there. I don't know how well you can see that. It's just hard to get pictures because this huge church is built on top of it. And then the church on top of it, this is what it looks like if you were to be inside of it. You can see they cut the floor out in the center, and then there's glass in the center, and then you look through the glass and you can look down into Peter's house. Pretty cool sight. Here is, we just finished a TV program, and we're all kind of tired out, enjoying the area. Here is the 5th or the 4th century synagogue. This was built, archaeologists know this was built on top of the 1st century synagogue. So this, even though this isn't the actual synagogue, this is the actual location where Yahshua was preaching on the Sabbath. And then you see the 7-branch menorah all over the Holy Land. You don't see anything other, not 9 or anything. You only see the 7 in archaeology. One of the next places we went to is Korazim, and this is a really interesting place. One of the 3 cities in which Yahshua spent much of his ministry. He spent his ministry in Capernaum, Korazim, and then Bethsaida. Joshua cursed Korazim for its unbelief. Matthew 11:21, woe unto thee, Korazim, woe unto thee, Bethsaida, for if the mighty works which were done in you had been done in Tyre and Sidon, they would have repented long ago in sackcloth and ashes. And here's some facts. The city was destroyed in the 4th century CE by an earthquake and rebuilt again in the 5th century, and that's where we see some of the stuff today. 5th century synagogue made of local black basalt stone was found here, and this synagogue measures 50 feet by 70. It's prominently displayed in the synagogue is the seat of Moses, and I'd like to get to that here in a second, which is kind of an interesting fact or artifact. It's also interesting to note that the unbelieving descendants of this town, which Joshua chastised because they wouldn't listen to his message, allowed a decoration of Medusa to be built right into their synagogue wall in the 5th century. So they were obviously not, it didn't care so much about truth. Here is the synagogue itself, and obviously you can see a lot of it fell down. The roof section is laying there in the front. Here is the main columns inside which held the roof up. And then they have a plaque right near the inscription, and I think this is really interesting because, again, it kind of proves, they wouldn't listen to Joshua, and then they end up carving. Who would carve a Greek god in their synagogue? But they did, and here's the image right here. Medusa carved right into the synagogue, right into a place that's supposed to be a house of Yahweh. Now, the seat of Moses, in Matthew 23:2, this is what you might recall this particular scripture. It says, saying, the scribes and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. All therefore, whatsoever they bid you observe, that observe and do, but do not you after their works. So Joshua is basically saying what they say on that seat of Moses, you observe and do. Well, they read the law on the seat of Moses. That was what they did. They came into the synagogue and they would actually read the law from that location. So Joshua is telling them what they're saying as they're reading the law, do, but don't do as they say. For they bind heavy burdens and grievous to be borne and lay them on men's shoulders. But they themselves will not move them with one of their fingers, but all their works they do for to be seen of men. They make broad their phylacteries and enlarge their borders of their garments and love the uppermost rooms at feasts and the chief seats in the synagogue. Now here is the actual seat of Moses that was found at Korazim, and this is in the Israel Museum. I wanted to show you the actual one. They have a mock-up here, and as you can see, everybody's got to get into sitting on this thing. He got Elder King and then Russ King, no relation, by the way, and then Elder Dwayne. I like the Cardinal shirt there, by the way. Sporting some Missouri teams on the seat of Moses. And then who's this guy? There's a guy I know. He likes to sit on the seat of Moses too, right? And then I had to get into it too. I thought I'd do the thinking man routine. So the next place we went is Migdal. You might have heard of Migdal before. I know you've heard of Mary Magdalene. That's actually where her name came from, Mary of Magdala. And you can read about her name there in Luke 8:2. In September 2009, a salvage dig of the Israel Antiquities Authority, prior to the construction of a hotel, revealed an ancient synagogue dating back 2,000 years, from 50 BCE to 100 CE, in the middle of a 120 square meter main hall. Archaeologists discovered an unusual stone carved with a 7-branch menorah. It is the first of its kind to be discovered in the early Roman period. In addition to the engraved stone, the walls are decorated with brightly colored frescoes. I'm trying to talk fast here so I can cover as much as I can. Here is the actual remnants of that synagogue, and we know Joshua would have been here probably many times. Now, when I talk to the archaeologists, they don't believe that's a seat of Moses. I, however, do. I think that's where they read the law of Moses right there. It wouldn't make any sense for just a piece of furniture. They found it literally right there in that location, right in the center. And you can see how some of these synagogues were built where they literally sit around the perimeter and they would read the law from the center. Now, this is a mock-up here, right? You can't see it, but there's a glass case behind that, and that's where they have the real one. And archaeologists believe that this artifact was depicting the temple in Jerusalem. You can see the 7-branch menorah. You can see the temple columns on the side. That's kind of the theory, but nobody, of course, knows for sure. They have a mikveh right in the area. In fact, all through the land of Israel, you see mikvahs. These are ritual baths. This is where they would actually go down and be ritually cleansed. And of course, this is a precursor to New Testament baptism. One of the real interesting sites we didn't see the first time we were there, but we saw this time, was Tel Hazor. This is where Joshua kills the king of Canaan, Jabin, and burns Hazor to the ground. Archaeological stratum dating from around 1200 BCE shows signs of catastrophic fire. It's really interesting, actually. And then they found cuneiform tablets found at the site referring to the etymological origin of the name Jabin. So this here, some people think it's a palace. Some think it's a temple. I think it's a temple. I believe this was the actual temple of Jabin, and I believe that that was an altar there in the center. And you can see the columns in the back. Some of this is reconstructed. They go through these areas and add a little to it so you can kind of visually see. They have a lot of the area was built with mud bricks. Here is a kind of an interesting area. This is behind me where I took that picture of the temple. They have these cultic sites, and you can see all those stones. They look like gravestones. You see those all sticking up back there? A lot of times they would go back and they do animal or human sacrifices in these areas. Here's another one I took a picture of. Actually, I wasn't supposed to go back there, but the archaeologist left, and Russ, he told me, hey, can you hop over there? So I hopped way back in, and I started snapping pictures. I don't think you're supposed to walk on any of this stuff, but I wasn't really worried about walking on polluting a cultic site. So anyway, this is in the Israel Museum. A whole bunch of these standing stones. You'll see this a lot. We saw this in Tel Dan as you go through the gates. You see these standing stones just sitting there. They're just a cultic, some believe it could be a phallic origin. It reminds me of this, Stonehenge, doesn't it? I obviously believe that this is part of a cultic site and has similarities. Well, in Deuteronomy 12, verse 2, this is what Yahweh says. He says, you shall utterly destroy all the places wherein the nations which you shall possess serve their mighty ones upon the high mountains and upon the hills and under every green tree. And you shall overthrow their altars and break their pillars. So this is part of what Yahweh's talking about here. And burn their groves with fire, and you shall hew down the graven images of their mighty ones and destroy the names of them out of that place. And we find an example of Joshua doing just that. In Joshua chapter 11, verse 10, and we'll read verses 10 through 11. And Joshua at that time turned back and took Hazor and smote the king thereof with the sword. For Hazor before time was the head of all those kingdoms. And they smote all the souls that were therein with the edge of the sword, utterly destroying them. There was not any left to breathe, and he burnt Hazor with fire, and all the cities of those kings and all the kings of them did Joshua take and smote them with the edge of the sword, and he utterly destroyed them as Moses, the servant of Yahweh, commanded. But as for the cities that stood still in their strength, Israel burned none of them, save Hazor only. That did Joshua burn. And here's remnants right here of the massive fire. And you can see the horizontal wood beam on top of that. When you see that, everything above that was a recreation. But below, right there, the main foundation stones, you see this around the whole temple complex. They're completely just cracked from massive heat. And there's no other way that these stones could have been cracked. Another interesting find there, they found at Hazor. Again, this was a major cultic site. Probably one reason why Yahweh told Joshua to burn the city. They basically have a cross standing stone here. And a cross is a pagan symbol. It goes back thousands and thousands of years. It's a symbol of the sun god. And I'll show you a little more about that. The plaque here from the Israel Museum says, standing stone decorated with a horned sun disk in the center. They found this at the temple location. They also found the image of the storm god. This is the largest statue of the storm god that has been found in the land. The god is depicted standing on a bull. His left hand clasped his sword with his right arm, now missing, was raised in a threatening gesture characteristic of this deity. The sun disk and crescent moon incised on his chest indicate his supreme position in the divine pantheon. You see the cross on his chest. And then here's another image. Now this wasn't at Hazor, but it does show Sol Invictus. And you see at the top right, What are those? Crosses. This, and if you might remember Constantine at the bridge, he looked up and saw the sign of, he said, of Yahweh, but what he saw basically was a cross. He was looking at the sun. It goes back to the same paganism. And you might, I'm sorry, I was looking at the wrong screen. There you go. That's Sol Invictus there. There's the crosses on the right. Here, nothing new under the sun. This is Assyrian king Shamshi V. This is 823 to 811 BCE. And then, of course, the Pope wearing the same disc, sun image. This was an interesting tower there at Hazor. This was still there from the Israelite period. They have a guy kind of carved in steel there at the top to give you an idea of size from a distance. But this was a location there for defense of the city, which they built later after they destroyed it. One of the really cool finds that I thought, anyway, I think several, I know Randy agrees with this, was we went to the site of Gomorrah. Now, this has been known for many years. Actually, Ron Wyatt kind of popularized it, I think, in the 80s. Genesis 14:2 talks about the city of Gomorrah. It says that these made war with Bera, king of Sodom, and with Berisha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, and Shember, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, which is Zoar. All these were joined together in the valley of Siddim, which is the Salt Sea. Now, here's pictures here. There's a ziggurat there in the foreground. You kind of see these, it's hard to tell in some of these, but you can see these areas that look like they were buildings. What's interesting is they're complete ash. You can grab them, just break pieces off, and there's sulfur balls embedded all over the area. It's the only, in this whole area, it's the only location where you find this. In fact, it's the only location on planet Earth where you find brimstone balls that are 99% sulfur. And they still burn. You can light them up. We've got some down below. If any of you want to see some, you can go down below into our bottom foyer area. We actually have some from this site. Just kind of another angle there. You can see some pieces of ash. We actually did a television program there, my dad and Elder Don, and we haven't got to edit that yet, but we'll get that out soon. There's the closer look at the ziggurat. 2 Peter 2 talks about this, and turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes, condemn them with an overthrow, making them an ensample unto those that after should live sinfully. Here's I went to the top and broke a piece off, and this is what it looks like. You can see the actual strata layers where the stone heated up and actually kind of amalgamated into these layers. This is from Masada looking down. You can see at the top of the image how that whole light area, that was where we were just at. And from looking at one of the first things I wanted to see was looking at the landscape and seeing the color variations. And you don't see any other color except for that particular area, which is just complete ash. And Josephus also talks about it. I don't have the quote, but he also talks about it as well. One of the next places we went to, I wanted to share with you, was the Mount of Olives. In Zechariah 14:4, a prophetic scripture, we read, "And his feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives shall cleave in the midst thereof towards the east and towards the west. And there shall be a great valley, and half of the mountain shall remove towards the north, and half of it towards the south." Now, what's interesting is they actually found a fault line that literally runs from the north and south. Or I'm sorry, it's from the east and west, because they had to move what was I think it was the Seven Arches Hotel. King Abdullah commissioned this hotel. As they were constructing it, they realized there was a fault line, so they had to move it farther south. And then everybody here has to get their picture taken. If you're standing in probably the most profound area, you see it it seems like every night on the nightly news, you got to get your picture taken, right? And there's Randy getting his picture taken. Here is looking from the city of David, looking back up to the Mount of Olives, and you can see thousands upon thousands of tombs. Everybody, the Jews are waiting for the Messiah. Of course, we already know he's here. He's come back again, but they're waiting for him because that's where he's coming, according to Zechariah. And then you can see the tombs, or a lot of these, they bury everybody above ground there. You can see all the tombs there. And actually, if you're looking, this would be looking west, you can see the southern part of the Temple Mount right there, which was built by Solomon the Magnificent, those walls. But right to the south, I know Don believes that main temple area to the right was Fort Antonia. And the actual temple would have been in the city of David, which would have been a little farther south. I can't really explain. There's a kind of a clump of trees right to the left there. Would have been somewhere down in there is where he believes. And it's very possible. I'm not sure. I don't know if I've made a 100% determination, but there's a lot of evidence to show that Fort Antonia is where the original, or where the current Temple Mount is. Now this is the Garden of Gethsemane. You can find olive trees that are like 1,400 years old. It's pretty crazy. And you can see the size of those trees there. I wanted to show that because it was kind of amazing. I'm almost done, guys. We ended up at the Western Wall. Got to go see the Western Wall, but I wanted to show you underneath the Western Wall. So that was the point. I had to do a quick prayer. I don't like praying with my hat on, but I didn't want to start an international incident, so I kept my hat on. I hope Yahweh will understand. But you can see in the cracks there, those are prayers that people have left in the wall. And of course, they believe the Western Wall is the closest area to the Holy of Holies. That's why they pray there, because they're longing for the temple. They're wailing for the temple. There's Ellie and Randy and Don. I'm sure they're figuring out some sort of who knows what, but they're doing something there. This is under the Wailing Wall. You can see the Herodian stones there on the left. You can see people that went down below also left prayers in the cracks. And then, of course, the steel frame allowed them to excavate down. So as they excavated, they had to put something up so everything doesn't collapse above. I wanted to show you this because Don pointed this out, and I thought it was interesting, thought it was noteworthy to show. These are Herodian stones sitting on bedrock right here. And one of his explanations is, if this was the Temple Mount, we should find some Solomonic stones, but we don't. We only find Herodian stones that basically hit bedrock. What's interesting is they have this stone called the Western Stone, and it's ginormous. We were down there. I couldn't even get it all in the picture. It's a monolithic stone ashlar block forming part of the lower level of the Western Wall. The largest stone in the Western Wall is visible within the Western Wall tunnel and ranks as one of the heaviest objects ever lifted by human beings without powered machinery. With an estimated weight of 517 tons and is one of the largest building blocks in the world. It's 44.6 feet long, 9.8 feet high, and has an estimated width of almost 11 feet. This is a huge stone. And you can see all these little squares cut into the stone. I asked Ellie what that was. And he said that they would actually put like wood that would come out. So they'd stick wood into those columns, they'd come out, and that would help hold their plaster in. Because they would, even though you see all these stones now, in the days of the Messiah, they literally would have put plaster over everything. So you would see this perfectly plastered wall, even though we think the Herodian stones look pretty. And there's Wilson. I caught him trying to take a picture. He didn't look too happy. I think he's going to yell at me later. And in the end, I don't want to take any more of your time. I'm about up here, but there's all our wonderful smiling faces. And I do have to say that I really enjoyed the trip. I really enjoyed spending the time with everybody here on the trip, especially Ed. If it wasn't for him, I mean, we wouldn't have any comic relief, right? No, it was really fun sharing the time with Ed and Loretta, of course, and everybody else that went. Elder Don was great, and it really helped us out when we were in the land to give that first century assembly perspective that you just don't get with anybody else. But anyway, thank you for listening to me. May Yahweh bless you, and I hope one day you'll have a chance to visit the Holy Land.
Thank you for watching today's teaching. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and stay up to date with all our latest releases. To stay connected to this ministry, download our mobile app. It's available in the App Store for Apple or Android. Simply search Yahweh's Restoration Ministry. Visit our extensive website at yrm.org. We have hundreds of teachings for men and women alike, and new articles added every week. Join our growing online congregation and watch us live every Saturday at 1:30 p.m. Central Time. by visiting yrm.org/live or following the live worship link on our mobile app. See below in the description on this video for many of the other ways to connect with us. Blessings and shalom.